Lavonte David does not sound like a guy that has decided on retirement, and that could certainly help the Buccaneers in 2026. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this episode of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the number one sports podcast network. I would like to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listener view every day. I am your host, James Yarcho, writer over at Bucs Report, covering the Buccaneers for over a decade now, here with you every Monday through Friday, along with the everydayers, and for that, I want to share my appreciation for your continued support of the show. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. It's the last call for football on FanDuel. If you're a new customer, bet just $5 and get $200 in bonus bets if you win. A big announcement for the NFL and how it's going to affect the Bucs when it comes to off-season spending. That is coming up in a little bit. I promised you yesterday that we were going to have a reaction to Lavonte David's interview with Kay Adams. First and foremost, if you haven't seen it yet or listened to it, make sure you check it out. The interview is nearly 30 minutes long, talking about the Bucs, Super Bowl, Luke Kuechly. It really is a lot of fun over there on the Up and Adams show. But I want to talk about two of the biggest things that were discussed that both revolve around Lavonte David's return. The first was when Kay Adams asked about Todd Bowles coming back and flat out asked him if Bowles wasn't returning, would Lavonte for sure be retiring? He said, quote, yeah, if Bowles wasn't coming back, there's no shot, to be honest with you. That's a fact. Just me and Bowles have that relationship. That's my guy, man. I've gotten extremely comfortable with him, comfortable with his defense, and our relationship is just, from a player to coach relationship, something that I always wanted. The past 7 years I've been working with him has been really, really fun and a joy just to understand his football knowledge. For me, being in year 14 and still learning things about football, where most people would probably be like, oh, I have everything figured out. But every year he teaches me something new. Him as a man, as a person, everybody in the locker room loves him. Obviously, the media and the fans gives him a hard time because you don't see a character out of him, but we see it all. That's why we love him. It definitely would have been different talk if he wasn't coming back, but that's my guy. We have constant communication, and he'll be one of the first people to know what my decision will be, end quote. This is really, really telling, like very telling. The biggest thing here is that he's being 100% honest. If it was the other way around and he was retiring because Todd Bowles was retained or because their working relationship wasn't as good as it is and that was playing into his decision, you would get that typical non-answer kind of thing where it's like, oh, no, that doesn't matter. I like Todd. We've been successful with him, but I have to make the decision that's best for me and my family and my health. So it's great that he's back, but this has to be a decision I make on my own. No, he's flat out saying the only reason that I am still considering playing, and not retiring is the fact that Todd Bowles is back. That's what, that's how important this move was in the eyes of Lavonte David. The fact that he opened up this much and was this transparent about Bowles and that forthright in his assessment of any potential future football career being tied to Todd Bowles is huge. Here's the thing. I know I was hard on Lavonte this season because he flat out wasn't himself. My assessment was Father Time has caught up to this dude. Turns out he battled a knee injury all season long that nobody really knew about, to the point that it had gotten to. His knee was being drained weekly. That obviously affected his performance when he wasn't able to move around the way that he's capable of because of that bad knee. So the question is that going to be a lingering issue moving forward, or is it something that he isn't going to have to deal with should he decide to come back? Is this a situation like Mike Evans where Last year didn't go the way that he wanted to because he was dealing with injury, and he's going to give it one last go because he knows he's better than what he put on film, and he's more capable of playing the way he did in 2024 rather than what we saw in 2025. Because let's be honest, 2024, we were all talking about how he looked like he was 25, not 35. Then for him to have the drop-off that he had last year was truly a shock. I expected a little bit of a drop-off, but I kept saying he lost 2 steps instead of 1. Well, when your knee is banged up and you're having to get it drained and you're dealing with that nagging injury, you're going to be a little slower. You're not going to be as quick or as fast. The mental part of his game is still there, but can he do it physically is the biggest question. What isn't a question is who he would be doing it for if he returns for a 15th season. Kay asked him if there was a world where he plays next year for someone other than the Bucs. And he said, quote, "To be honest with you, I don't think so. It's Bucs or no one else. I played my 14-year career with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and they've been real. They've been loyal to me. The fans have been real loyal to me. My family has grown to love this city. I know everybody in the building, relationships with the guys I've built throughout my career, especially those young guys I've built relationships with. I don't think me being somewhere else would feel right. I don't know if I'll be able to take it serious enough. It would probably feel awkward. It would feel weird because I know the ins and outs of that building at one buck, and and me walking into another city, another building, it would be a different aspect for me. Being this late in my career, I don't think I would be able to withstand that. But I'm a Buck, man. They've been loyal to me all these years, and it's going to continue to be like that." End quote. Fingers crossed. Prayer said that Mike Evans feels the same way, but that isn't really a huge surprise coming from Lavonte. It's nice for the reassurance, that he wouldn't consider entering free agency and playing his final year or maybe final 2 years or whatever it is with another franchise, but he's a lifer. He's always been a lifer. He only ever wanted to wear one uniform. He said he was close to leaving a couple of years ago and decided not to. I think it was when they hired Bruce Arians. So from that moment on, we knew this was the only uniform he was ever going to put on. It's just always nice to have that confirmation come from the player himself, rather than continuing to speculate. And you kind of see it going on with Demario Davis right now, right? That's what Kay Adams referenced when she brought this up to Lavonte, that she asked Demario if he was going to return next season, and he basically said he's going to enter free agency. He's going to weigh all of his options. It's not a lock that he's going to return to the New Orleans Saints. With Lavonte, it's if he's playing for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, period. That's what he flat out said. That's his decision. So it's just a matter of whether or not he's going to play. Listening to him speak, this does not sound like a man that's ready to retire. And I'll get more into the decision-making process that he spoke about in just a little bit. But looking at his face, looking at the way he talked about football, looking at the way he talked about the franchise and the people inside the building, this does not seem like a guy who is ready to retire. This feels like a guy that knows that he can go out there and keep playing at the highest of high levels. You all were disappointed. I was disappointed in his performance last year, but we know why it happened. He was talking about the same thing with Baker Mayfield, about how, Baker started off on fire and then things dropped off during that second half of the season. And he talked about all the injuries across the team, but especially the ones that Baker was dealing with, the ones that the offensive line was dealing with. Now, of course, we know he was dealing with an injury as well, and it affected everybody's performance. When you have these pieces that are not performing up to the level of expectation, but there's really nothing you can do about it because it's not a mental issue. It's not a preparation issue. It's strictly a physical issue and trying to battle through something that affects the entire team. So Lavonte is hyped that Baker is coming back. And honestly, it sounds like he's a guy that wants to be back. But Lavonte talked about how hard this decision is, and I'll tell you why it's crucial for what the Bucs are going to do in the offseason. That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Tax season doesn't have to take over your life. This year, TurboTax is making it easier than ever to just hand things off and move on with your day. With TurboTax full service, you can have your taxes done for you by a trusted local expert start to finish without the stress or the guesswork. Instead of spending hours trying to figure out forms, you can meet with a local TurboTax expert in person or connect online. They handle everything from W-2s to self-employment forms and work to get you every deduction. You can upload your documents, go about your day, and get updates right in the TurboTax app. I have been a dedicated TurboTax user from the time I started doing my own taxes 2 decades ago, and I've stayed with them because of how easy they make everything and because they always ensure that I never miss out with their expert help. For a limited time, you can have your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150 all in if a TurboTax expert didn't file for you last year. Just file by February 28th. Take taxes off your plate and get back to your life. Visit TurboTax.com/local to book your appointment today. It's the last call for football on FanDuel. One final Sunday, one last kickoff, final chance to get in on the action before the NFL season officially comes to a close. This is Super Bowl 60, and FanDuel is making sure you're right in the middle of it with a special offer just in time for the biggest game of the year. Whether you're backing the favorite, riding with the underdog, building one last same-game parlay, this is the game everyone's been waiting for. This is where predictions turn into plays, stats turn into storylines, and every snap feels bigger. It's the perfect way to cap off the season and make the Super Bowl even more exciting from kickoff to the final whistle. The Seattle Seahawks are 4.5-point favorites with an over-under of 45.5 against the New England Patriots. Sam Darnold is the favorite to win the game's MVP at plus 100, followed by Drake May at plus 230, Jackson Smith and Jigba at plus 600, and Kenneth Walker III at plus 850. If you're a new customer, bet just $5 to get $200 in bonus bets. If you win, make it count, because after the Super Bowl, the season is over. Last call for football on FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of Super Bowl 60. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listener view every day. Thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. Check out the All Access Club, ad-free episodes, exclusive perks. Click the link right in the show notes to find out everything you need to know about that club. When you've been doing something for your entire life, the idea of not doing it anymore is scary. It can be exciting, sure. I've made a couple of career changes over the course of my life, and it's always scary, but it's always exciting about the potential of what could be. The unknown is always scary. So Kay Adams asked Lavonte David how hard a decision like this, whether to retire or return, is for him. And Lavonte said, quote, "It's very hard. It's extremely hard, honestly, just because the game is all I know. I've been playing football since I was 6 years old, and I'm 36 years old now. I've never missed a year of playing football. I always kind of played at a high level, but I've always said if I'm not able to be out there and be my best, take control of a game like I know how to, I don't think it's worth going out there. Still, in the back of my mind, being me, I feel like I can. But at the end of the day, there are certain other factors that play into my decision. I'm going to take a little bit more time and see where it goes from there. You never know. A sign might pop up. Luke, meaning Luke Kuechly, might get in the Hall of Fame, and I might get geeked up to go again. You never know." End quote. Lavonte then elaborated on all of the things that do go into this decision. And he said, quote, "Your body, your mental aspect, daily routines, regimen, the people. There's so much stuff that lies into it. When you get to this age, you want consistency. I want the same people working around me all the time. I want to be able to have my schedule laid out and certain types of structure that I like, things like that. All of that plays a huge factor. But the main thing is how you are mentally and how you are physically." End quote. Mentally, Lavonte seems like he's already there. He mentioned that he feels in his mind he can still take over a game, I just talked about, the way that he looked, just his facial expressions, talking about the idea of returning. It looks like a guy that isn't ready to walk away. I think the biggest question looming for him is the physical aspect and then the willingness to go out there and do it and put his body through it at the age of 36. Now, Kay Adams ended the interview by saying that she thinks he's coming back. Lavonte responded with, it's absolutely possible. He has not ruled out anything. But I am starting to lean more towards he's returning than I did before. We brought this up with Evan a couple of weeks ago after another Lavonte interview, and Evan was still convinced Lavonte's walking away from the game. I was still relatively convinced that Lavonte's walking away from the game. I was at about a 5% chance that he returns. I'm up to about 40%. I think we're close to a coin flip decision here from Lavonte David. In my percentage has increased a little bit more over the course of the last week or two, based on what he's been saying publicly, based on the way he's saying it, the excitement that you see when he's talking about, still playing the game. He does not appear to be someone that's like, you know what, I'm just done. He doesn't appear to be like Peyton Manning was or John Elway was, and knowing that they can't physically do it anymore. He seems a little bit more like the Favre type before Favre was retiring and unretiring every offseason, where it's like, I know I can still play. I know I still want to play, but I don't know if I want to keep putting my body through it, that kind of thing. Physically, he knows he can play. Mentally, he knows he can play. It's just a matter of weighing the pros and cons. Let me say this. If Lavonte does return, even if it's just at the level that he played last season, maybe a little bit better, this is going to help the Bucs immensely in the 2026 season. We've been talking about the Bucs needing 2 starting linebackers. That's been a running topic for literally months. I mentioned this week the best approach is probably to sign one in free agency and then use a high draft pick on another. Maybe that's Sonny Styles in the first round at pick 15. Maybe it's somebody on day 2. But the combination of a veteran and a rookie would be ideal. I mentioned on yesterday's show some realistic free agent options for the Buccaneers. Nakobe Dean is at the top of my list. Quay Walker is right behind him. I love Alex Anzalone. I love Matt Milano. If Lavonte comes back, you still go out and you get one of those guys, for sure. Maybe it's one of the older guys that you can get for 2 to 3 years, not quite as expensive as Quay Walker, but you still sign your other proven starter in free agency. Now, in the draft, you've opened yourself up to taking a player on day 2, cough, cough, Jacob Rodriguez out of Texas Tech, or early day 3 that can learn and develop behind Lavonte while getting to know the guy that he'll line up next to in 2027. You get a jump on the development of your future starter this year so that by the time he's hitting the field in 2027, he knows Bowles' system. He's watched a Hall of Fame linebacker ahead of him, learn from him on the field, off the field, in the film room, in the locker room, everything. So that next season you aren't having to find another starter. You have them locked, loaded, ready to roll. That changes everything about what you're able to do in the draft. You don't need that 15th pick for a linebacker anymore because you do have starters locked in. You can use it on an edge rusher or in a trade for an edge rusher because you've taken care of your 2 biggest needs in other ways. From there, you address edge rush, corner, tight end, depth along the trenches when it comes to the NFL draft. You would be setting this team up for success this year with your starters, plus adding depth along with Voss in the linebacker core while also planning your future without Lavonte. Lavonte's return would really ease a lot of the stress and the pressure that I'm sure Jason Light and Todd Bowles are feeling about having to find 2 starting linebackers and an elite edge rusher all in one offseason in order to fix this defense and get back to being as competitive as they should have been, to get back to being one of the top defenses in the NFL. Lavonte, that's a leader, that's a teacher, that's a player that you can trust to help this team out. Not only help them on the field, but help develop the next generation behind them. Now I'm starting to think there's a very real chance that he's back for a 15th and final season, and that will have a domino effect into the future if the Bucs are able to draft his replacement this year. The Bucs did get a little more breathing room for their offseason shopping list. That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. If you've ever hired someone who looked good on paper but wasn't the right fit, you know how important that is. You want candidates who truly match what you're looking for, so trust Indeed sponsored jobs. If you're hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed's sponsored jobs puts your post at the top of the page and helps you reach the right candidates faster. Indeed sponsored jobs helps your listing stand out and reach quality candidates faster, and they'll boost your post to the people who are the best match for your role, and that makes the true difference. Spend more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with less stress, less time, more results using Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners of this show get a $75 sponsored job credit to help give your job the premium placement it deserves at Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL. Just go to Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL right now and support the show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Wrapping things up here on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, and we talked yesterday about some realistic free agents the Bucs could target this offseason along the edge and at linebacker. Now, it appears they're going to have a little bit more in their budget than what was projected initially. The NFL informed teams on Friday that the salary cap for this season is going to be somewhere between $301.2 and $305.7 million. That is a $22 to $26.5 million increase over last year's salary cap, and a nearly $100 million increase since 2022. So what does that mean for the Bucs? Well, over the cap has the Bucs with an estimated $16.7 million in cap space for this year, but that was based on an estimated $295.5 million cap. With this increase, the Bucs will have somewhere between $22.4 and $26.9 million. So they could have more than $10 million more than what we initially expected. That is not chump change. Now, bear in mind that you need around $5 to $6 million to sign your rookie draft class. Granted, that's assuming that the Bucs don't trade away one of those picks or two of those picks for a premium edge rusher. So that would drop the Bucs, if they keep all their picks, down to the $16 to $20 million in cap space range. So there still needs to be some restructures and some moves made to free up more space, but the Bucs can work with this. You can drop about $10 million on one of those free agent linebackers that I talked about yesterday. You'll need about maybe $3 million for a running back. Again, I'm looking at you, Tyler Algier. Otten returning, you're looking at less than $10 million a year. And remember, they can structure these deals so that there's a bigger cap hit down the line rather than this coming year if they are multi-year deals. But if you're going to go out and sign Trey Hendrickson or you're going to trade for Max Crosby, you still got to find some cap room. You're going to need probably another $15 to $20 million freed up to do all of the things that you need to do this offseason in order to compete for a championship. Because we have not even begun including or talking about what it's going to cost to bring back Lavonte if he returns, as well as Mike Evans. You can restructure Tristan, who is signed through 2029. You can add some void years there to spread out some money. Baker's in a contract year. You can extend him and push some of that money out. Gedeke, same as Tristan Wirfs, signed through 2029. You can restructure that one a little bit, add a void year or two, push some of that money down the road in terms of the cap hit. Vita Vea is entering a contract year. Get him extended, move some of that money around. It's not going to be too crazy difficult to free up $15 to $20 million and give yourself, closer to $40 to $50 million in order to do all of the things that you want to do. The problem that they're going to have this time around versus what we talked about last offseason is that they don't really have a lot of guys that they can cut that are going to free up the kind of money that they need. There's no Jamel Dean this offseason. We talked a lot about the Bucs, designating Jamel Dean as a post-June 1st cut. freeing up a bunch of money, getting to go out and spend all of that. So this is going to be about extensions and restructures rather than releases. But all of that said, it should not be a shock if the Bucs find themselves with $40 to $50 million in cap space to work with rather than $20 to $25 million like they're estimated to have right now. Mike Greenberg is still the best in the business at that kind of stuff, and Jason has shown a willingness to do whatever it takes to put a team on the field that can compete for a Super Bowl. I said it all offseason last year and into the 2025 season. This is a team that can compete for a Lombardi trophy right now. That's still true. If they go out and they get a reliable linebacker, a stud edge guy, and then solid depth in the trenches on both sides of the ball. That was their biggest Achilles heel. It was outside of being healthy. It was your linebackers were not playing to the level that you expected or needed them to in this defense. Hassan Reddick did not live up to expectations. He did not perform the way that the Bucs had hoped he was going to perform. So Yaya Diaby had to carry the load on his own. I've said it a million times. He's a Robin. He's not a Batman. And all those injuries along the offensive line and not having the proper depth, it torpedoed this team. The window to compete for a Lombardi is not going to be open forever. So you have to strike while you can and get those pieces when they're available. The pieces that the Bucs need to put this team over the top are out there right now. They can go get them right now. Jason Light has not been afraid to kick the can down the road with those void years and basically take a loan out from the future in order to win in the present. But a little extra money with the NFL salary cap exceeding $300 million, that's certainly going to help things get started in the 2026 offseason. That is going to do it for this episode. Please check out everything going on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at @JYarcho_Bucs, Instagram and TikTok at Locked On Bucs in both of those places. Subscribe on YouTube with the notifications turned on, as well as wherever you get your podcast. Join the Everydayer Club. You can check out the differences in the two tiers there. Click the link in the show notes, lockedonbucs.supercast.com. If you want to support the show, but you don't want to join an Everydayer Club, it's real simple. Like this episode on YouTube, leave a 5-star review wherever you get podcasts. It does help other Buccaneers fans find the show and really does go a long way in telling us what you like about this program. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding day. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. I want to thank you so much for joining me right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.